introduced to Tuli right after I arrived to New York to start my new life here. And that was the end of the 70s. And the Soho was still the center of art, not like now the center of fashion and whatever. My life was completely enriched, like all of your life, meeting and knowing Tuli, because he was a friend, teacher, and he was a very special human being, made me feel like it's okay to be human. And he's been a wonderful friend, a long-time neighbor, and I've learned so much from him, and I really, really feel so blessed. And I think all of us who know Tuli, who met Tuli, has a certain kind of responsible job, because he planted something in us, and we have to really share that joy and wisdom and everything we learned from Tuli with other people. We have to spread whatever we learned from Tuli. And before I start what I want to say about Tuli next, I'd like to thank you to my husband, Steve. It was a big job to organize this thing. I'm very proud of him. I didn't help too much. Anyway, I wrote a poem when Tuli passed away, but it's too sad, so I don't want to read it. And because it's a birthday party, and I like to talk about Tuli and fashion. You remember how he dressed? You remember? He was one of those very special person who knew how to dress himself his way. No outside influences on him. He just picked whatever he wanted to wear, the way he wanted to wear, and it was so fantastic. I've never seen a guy wear such amazing combination of colors, because most of the guys they don't wear colors, and when they do become colorful, usually they become very kind of ridiculous. But Tuli was the opposite. He knew how to wear colors, and the way he wore, like green jacket with purple shirt and blue hat and whatever. It was so joyful, and that was like himself, very poetic, and it's not a fashion statement. I know he wouldn't be a nudist if he had a choice, but if he had to wear something, he would wear something. And Tuli and I really had, because we are neighbors, we saw each other often in a very, on the street level. So whenever I saw him was wearing some fantastically crazy green jacket or whatever, I said, wow, where did you get it? And he said, you know, canal jeans, $1 bin stuff, and then now it's canal jeans is Bloomingdale, and if you remember the old Soho, it was canal jeans, and outside they had fantastic $1 bin, and I used to go there, and he used to go there, so we used to kind of compete each other. What treasure we could get from that boxes. So anyway, Tuli's one of the most amazing things it was, like his political standpoint, his poetic standpoint. He was always himself. He was never affected by any other outside force. His conviction and philosophy was always basically the same since he was a child. And that is not an easy job. It's because we always get affected and we change our courses because of our weakness being affected by other forces. But Tuli's strength was always there, and his strength was always so gentle. And that's something we should all learn. Okay, thanks.
I also met at Tuli's bedside in the hospital, and you know, sometimes that happens. You know, people bring people together, and I met Jeffrey that way, and we had a great talk about what do you do if you're playing in a country that you don't really like their politics, but you want to play there anyway. And Jeffrey said, well, you donate a lot of that money to the good causes you feel good about. And he taught me a valuable lesson. So I said to him, well, what if we're all playing in America and we don't like America's politics? What do we do when we get that fucking paycheck? And he said, I don't know, it's America. I mean, that's where I live. So I said, okay. So anyway, Jeffrey Lewis.
Happy birthday, Tuli. I love you so much. I love all of you people here. I make up songs and I make comic books, and sometimes I make these things that combine songs and comic books. This is the newest one, The Fall of the Soviet Union, and the one that I was working on. Though I often would ask Tuli his advice and his input while working on these, and he always, of course, had tremendous insight and humor and philosophy and an armload of books to give me on every topic that I would work on. And I was working on this one in August about the French Revolution, and we did some of the work by his side there, and it was one that I never got to get his full input on, but Steve and Sky and Thelma, as we were all hanging out there, they gave me a lot of good insight and turned me on to some other people to talk to. So this is my song, my music video, low-budget music video on the French Revolution, which it's, well, okay, I'll let it speak for itself. Anyway, happy birthday, Tuli. This is supposed to have music that goes with it, but I haven't quite learned how to play guitar and turn the pages at the same time. The King of France was absolute, the people all were destitute, the year was 1789. Churches paid no income tax, neither did aristocrats, wars were costing money all the time. But Enlightenment ideas had entered people's ears, like liberty, equality, and brotherhood. People starving broke under feudalism's yoke, knew no church or king was gonna do them any good. There was such financial crisis, the king had to take advice to try an old thing called the States General Government. The Estates General had 3 votes, nobles, church, and common folks. 2 to 1, the commons lose, it always went. The commons in frustration said, we represent the nation. The nobles and the church must lose their privileges. And the rich were scared for real when they stormed to the Bastille, and rebellions also broke out in the villages. At the palace in Versailles, the king and queen were heard to sigh when the National Assembly made a Bill of Rights. Then the Women's March embarrassed them and chased them into Paris, and the church and nobles lost their power overnight. Arguments got hot whether to keep a king or not. Different groups saw different ways to run the country best. But when the royal family tried to flee the country in disguise, they were busted and then put under a house arrest. And all of Europe's kings were terrified to hear these things, so France was threatened on all sides by enemies. And when these other kings declared the King of France had to be spared, this made the King of France look worse to the revolutionaries. They had built a new machine, the quick and painless guillotine. They said it's nicer than the king's medieval torture rack. And they put it to a vote, and then they dropped it on his throat. And every king across the world just had a heart attack. So they attacked from north and south, and they attacked from east and west. Revolutionary France was in a desperate state. And when the radical Marat was killed politically, now that was what it took for France's outlook to degenerate. The new leader, Robespierre, said enemies were everywhere. For a year the guillotine was working endlessly. And though he freed the slaves, it's true, Robespierre's head came off too. Then France was run by the more moderate Directory. But the Directory was lame, and France's only good news came from their armies out in Europe winning more and more. And the man who made them win was General Napoleon, but when he came back home he made himself the emperor. So it was a painful climb to get get from kings to modern times, but the French Revolution always paved the way, because the ideas that sparked it first have never ever been reversed. It was the biggest change that shaped our Western world today. And of course, a great quote, which I'm sure Tuli was aware of, when Chu Enlai, Chinese communist leader, at some point in the 60s, somebody asked Chu Enlai what he thought the importance of the French Revolution was for the human race. He said, "It's too early to tell." So, I love you, Tuli. I love all of you people. Keep on being great.
Thinking back, I can think back on many birthdays that we celebrated with Tuli. I remember Steve, Yuko, Thelma, Harry Udell, Lori at the Odessa. And when Tuli passed this summer, I was upstate. I was unable to attend at the St. Mark's, but at the same time, I did write this piece, and I'd like to read it. How admirably he pulled off the trick we all aspire to live nobly, seemingly without regret, perhaps foolish to believe that, yet you clever enough to have made it appear so, who claimed the sanctity of your being, transformed simplicity into grace, managed to craft the luxury out of poverty's habits, burrow deeply into the meat of existence with your voracious vegetarian appetite for truth and knowledge, your urban garden sowed in splendor, rose magnificently through the cracks in the concrete, over the rubble-strewn lots. We gather at the fruits of your willing heart, having managed to clear the overgrown weeds from the recesses of our minds. Zen warrior of delight, who uncovered a pathway to elevate yourself high above the crowded tenement architecture of the Lower East Side, working to translate the quotidian into chapbooks which recorded eternity, which you read in countless mythic, long-gone small cafes. You were able to take the dull tedium of existence, make it appear divine. Shining through the absurdity passed off as truth, while mocking the fates, you never appeared a fool. Your Eastern European immigrant passion transmuted to bohemian rapture, rabbinical prophet of anarchistic joy, your talent attacking tyranny, blind obedience, restraint, always in the forward guard of the battalions of inspiration. Your presence enough to incite all to accept your madness as brilliance. The lengthy rows of bookshelves lining your skull, digested into succinct passage, cartoon line, song, lyric, verse, ode. Satirical trickster who was able to perform the subtle transformations, parody the powers, rebuke the arrogant, reshape the frail vessel of bone and blood into an assault weapon, opening the floodgates, bounding consciousness. You gladly accepted pleasure as the price of admission to your show, offered up yourself freely in street corner encounter, on cable, stage, craftily resisting all of society's lures, enticements, the carefully set snares, traps designed to tempt hungry ego, and which most greedily grasp at, pretending otherwise, derisively declaring that they have resisted, while anxiously awaiting the first opportunity to barter their souls. You never seem to waver. Your sly smile, gravelly voice, slight laughter, Avedon-captured grin hovers over the East Village skyline, as familiar as the Con Ed smokestacks towering over East 14th Street. Few who are offered the brass ring, able to resist the temptation of a lifetime passed in the obscurity of the universal recognition offered by all you encountered as you wandered the bereft alphabet city streets through your pilgrim days, past reveling in the forgotten lessons of history that you embrace. Archaic scriptures of Bakunin, John Reed, Emma Goldman, Joe Hill, Carlos Tresca, Marx, prophets of a now forgotten world who believed they revealed an unfolding future, offered up their bold dreams in crowded East 4th Street union halls to shouts and cries of religious-like exultation. You too beheld your faith for a better world, offered up to your zealots who never seemed to waver. With manic wanderer who ventured down 2nd Avenue, joined to the lengthy lineage of Yiddish actors who performed their lines perfectly, past the Bowery flops, inhaling the stale piss odor as rose petal, inciting the suicidal whores and McGurks to rise up saintly, stroll the crowded streets past the pushcarts laden down with immigrant hope, smiling at the peddlers offering up their lofty dreams, disguised as bunches of carrots, loaves of bread, fish, Reichian renegade, ready to burrow into the tomes of conlingual truth. Come away with your bardic beard dripping rapture, who spread your passion freely across the wide splendor of Tompkins Square Meadow, over Times Square, Chappaqua, and cross 60s America in VW bus that was able to harness the nation's agony, subverting the tall Nebraskan corn stalks. The Kansas wheat appeared to bend in the breeze listening to your song, as did the sons and daughters of ministers and warlords. You passed through all the veils unnoticed, ably disguised to all but your limitless flock. Wily jester who resisted the splendor of revelation without paying the price of dull agony most endure. Purveyor of pleasure, Blakean battler exposing societal convention as mere sham, a corrupt bargain entered knowing that regret is the price most meekly accept as their lot, snarling your truths in lyrical prophecy, espousing your living theater which inspired each into his own imagined ecstatic realm, cavorting towards some inner fertile ground from which one could raise himself, reborn anew. You peered out towards the glory of the East River sunrise, shone triumphant beyond the squalor of Avenue D projects to behold the Jerusalem of splendor, which you were able to transcribe into the hungry ache of morning, who offered up your eager heart, ably to boldly pronounce the sacred ah in the moment we relinquish reason. You raised your sword up against fear's purveyors, invoked the wrath of your pacifist nature, your righteous indignation driven as far as to kill for peace. Amidst the noise, haste, your voice rang true, pure, strong enough so that images of slum goddesses, peace eyes, even the massive Pentagon might appear to lift high above the earthly realm, float transcendent into a world born in the agony of sentient arousal. Through the darkness, you raised a glimmer of light, mocked the power of the false idols who raised the military-industrial complex, sculpted from an empire of fear. Oracle of the outrageous, you made the unthinkable seem reasonable, were able to take the dull tedium of nothing, make it seem a resplendent howl of triumphant victory. For those who claim joy as their rebuke, raised up in subversive gatherings, monitored closely by the secret agents of the state who maintain vast files on your activity. Sage of street corner wisdom, bardic battler, noble teacher, whose pedagogy of 1,001 ways of doing everything rings true, who offered up prophecy in passing, unleashing torrents of words in endless small press books printed on newsprint, sold for pennies, designed to disintegrate into the oblivion of St. Mark's gutter at dawn. You hearkened back to an old world while leading us into a bold new land. In the reverential silence of morning, I wonder where your brilliance moves to when unleashed from your body. Realize that it seeds, flowers in all those who dream the truths you beheld. Your thin body, scant hopes you delivered to each with your presence. How awesome to fathom the truth of a life fully lived. All the ecstasy a body can endure. when the demons are put to rest. Superstition realized as such. You live on in each of us, having known you in the intimacy of your smile. All that we readily relinquish, for which we receive so little in return. Those you managed to gather about you as a lost tribe, whose beings you nourished. You offered yourself so willingly, never foolish enough to seek anything in return. Against the dull forces I inveigh.
I've been eating word about his health, all these years since he went through what we went through, up and on and on and on. And meanwhile, this is the thing at St. Mark's Church. I'm sitting there blind. I'm at the house by myself, and no one came to that damn apartment and took me to pick me up to take me over to St. Mark's Church. So that's what that was all about. I first met Tuli. I was living on 10th Street and Avenue B, and we had a Peace-Side bookstore. Some of you might remember, don't remember. It was between Avenue B and Avenue C on the uptown side of the street. And from there, they moved from there, and then they moved over across from Tompkins Square Park on Avenue A between 9th and 10th Street, a little storefront. Years later, because the Fillmore East opened up, and lucky for them, they got offices in the Fillmore East. I don't know how they all got offices in Fillmore East. Fillmore East was located over there. Fillmore East was located over there in on East 4th Street and Second Avenue. They put slides on and Johnny Coltrane and all through Miles Davis, Laura Heard, all through played over there back in those days. But meanwhile, Ed Saunders, I don't know if Ed is here tonight.
Ed is here.
Yeah, but anyway, they came with this crazy idea. I don't know where they got the idea from. Number one, they came with this insane magazine, and of course, they thought it was the hippest thing in the world, because everyone else thought it was the hippest thing in the world, because everyone was mad with what was going on with the civil rights movements and the war in Vietnam, especially us down here. And of course, we call it fuck the government and segregation and integration and kiss our fucking ass. So meanwhile, they started a magazine called Fuck You. I don't know if that magazine's still around, but it should be. If Playboy was talking about some shit, that is the thing that should be archived. Because they had some great poetry in that magazine. They had all kinds of stuff in that magazine. And meanwhile, what they did, they put together the pubs, and what they would do, I was thinking about that tonight as I was listening to people read, is that they would have a music performance in Tompkins Square Park from time to time. And they were so heroic and courageous, is that what they would do, they would get a live pig and bring them into the middle of Tompkins Square Park and run the pig for president. Anyway, so having said that, of course I followed him through all those years. And of course I followed Ed for all the things he did all those years. And in fact, I started covering that trial out there, Manson out there in California, when we saw that newspaper down there called East Village Other. And of course, with all the stuff that Tuli was all those years. And finally, all I remember is that Grace Peely and Tuli finally moved to Peace-Side bookstore, and they moved down to 3rd Avenue somewhere. I can't remember what it was. It was a bar or some dirt place down there in South where Bob is right now. Bob Holman is right now, and they kept that thing going. And of course, what I love about Tuli more than anything else is that he was the kind of guy. He wasn't interested in war, he wasn't interested in hate, he wasn't interested in segregation, he wasn't interested in anything that divided people. He was always the kind of guy who believed that people should get together. I remember one time, and this is a rather personal story, and I'll keep the names to myself, but what happened is that this one young lady called me over one day. She says, "Listen, Steve, I'm looking here at a sign. It says, make love, not war. It's right on my fuse. He's that kind of a guy. Here's the point. What does it matter? No matter what does it matter? No matter what does it matter? What does it matter when nothing matters, when everything's scattered and everything turns to darkness and all there is light? Thank you.
Oh, down in Mississippi, down in New Orleans, the oil combustion in a steady stream. It's a killer spill, and Sarah Palin sailed away. So drill, baby, drill became spill, baby, spill all day. Kill, baby, kill, baby. No more nesting areas, no more fishing beds. Dolphins, birds, and turtles, yes, they turn up dead. No shrimp on the bottoms. The fish have passed away. And a new Katrina could be coming. No reefs to keep it at bay. So if you like your lobster with butter and oil, you want your planet not to spoil. Think about natural energy. Don't despoil the ecology. No room for the reaper. Radioactive roulette to play. And some more tools for the terrorists to come and blow us away. Yeah, it's clean, green energy, that's the source. Harness the earth, natural force. Solar in deserts and reap the wind. A world in balance is a world to be win.